seems to be correlated to the EPA agency withdrawing its support for California's cancer warning on glyphosate. Now, this is important because 5 days after the EPO this year, Bayer filed their opening brief to the Supreme Court, citing Trump's executive order and hinging their case on the EPA's warnings or lack thereof of glyphosate. So we have internal emails from your agency saying that Bayer wanted to thank you and your agency for removing support for California's warning because their case before the Supreme Court right now hinges on you not warning the American people and withdrawing your support on glyphosate. Do you understand the conflict of interest that is before the American people right now, Mr. Secretary?
The U.S. Supreme Court appeared divided on Monday over an effort by pesticides maker Bayer to shut down thousands of lawsuits accusing the company of failing to warn users that the active ingredient in its Roundup weed killer causes cancer. The justices heard arguments in the German company's appeal of a jury verdict in Missouri State Court, awarding $1.25 million to a man named John Durnell, who said he was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma after years of exposure to glyphosate in Roundup.
This fight is bigger than one heated exchange on Capitol Hill. It is about glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup, one of the most widely used herbicides in America. It is about whether Bayer should keep facing lawsuits from people who say the product caused their cancer. And it is about whether the EPA, under Lee Zeldin, moved in ways that helped Bayer at the exact moment the company was making its case to the Supreme Court. AOC's line of attack was simple and devastating. If Bayer discussed litigation strategy with EPA officials, and the agency later shifted its posture on warnings, how is that not a conflict the public deserves to understand?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Secretary Zeldin. This week is a big week in the Supreme Court and Congress regarding considerations of glyphosate. Glyphosate is the active ingredient in the herbicide Roundup, which is produced by Bayer, the multi-billion-dollar foreign chemical company that also owns Monsanto. It's used on hundreds of millions of acres of farmland in the U.S., including corn, wheat, soybeans, and even almonds. And glyphosate is even used to dry out crops before they are harvested. Correct, Administrator Zeldin?
Correct.
Thank you. Glyphosate is also internationally recognized as likely carcinogenic to humans, with particular links to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. In fact, tens of thousands of lawsuits in the United States, many issued by farmers with high exposure, have been filed against Bayer for failing to warn them about the cancer risk of exposure. Now, interestingly, Administrator Zeldin, on February 18th of this year, President Trump released an executive order to increase the production of glyphosate in the United States, correct?
Yes.
And not only did that executive order call to increase the production of glyphosate, it also called for legal immunity for Bayer from the tens of thousands of Americans who are seeking justice in court for their toxic exposure. Now, Secretary Kennedy was here a couple of weeks ago, and when he was asked about glyphosate and the rollbacks against protections against toxic chemicals, he said that we would, quote, have to ask Lee Zeldin about that. So you're here before us today. Administrator Zeldin, have you ever participated in a meeting with Bayer where you discussed the legal or litigation issues that the company was facing?
No, I never did.
Okay, I have
My meeting with them was very brief and that topic did not come up.
All right, I do. Are you aware of any outreach that they would have in your agency about this?
I could say that I directly had a brief meeting,
Okay.
But it was a brief meet and greet, and that topic did not come up.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'd like to submit EPA visitor logs from July 7th, 2025 to the committee.
Without objection, so ordered.
And you're certain they didn't bring up anything regarding your work?
I'm telling you 100%, absolutely. I Maybe there was some brainstorming that was done beforehand of potential
Are
topics.
you aware of any?
That topic was not brought
Are
up.
you aware of anything brought up to any members of your staff or your team? Your senior team?
I am not aware of that, no.
Okay, I would like to submit to the record some internal emails from the EPA that I have acquired via a Freedom of Information Act submission.
Without objection, so ordered.
We have documentation here, emails from your senior advisor for Agriculture and Rural Affairs saying that you were meeting with the Bayer CEO last year. He said in these emails that they will be bringing up some legal/judicial issues. More specifically, in this internal email in your EPA, it says that Bayer was specifically seeking to and discussing Supreme Court action. They will want an update on EPA's regulatory review, and that, interestingly, Bayer will provide a small thanks for updating the glyphosate webpage from the EPA and work on MAHA. Do you have any idea what they might have been referring to in this email?
Well, first off, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, it's possible that the team was doing brainstorming of potential topics.
Okay.
As somebody who actually attended
Thank
the
you.
meeting.
I'm sorry, I just have 40 seconds. I'm not trying to be rude. This glyphosate update that they're referring to seems to be correlated to the EPA agency withdrawing its support for California's cancer warning on glyphosate. Now, this is important because 5 days after the EPO this year, Bayer filed their opening brief to the Supreme Court, citing Trump's executive order and hinging their case on the EPA's warnings or lack thereof of glyphosate. So we have internal emails from your agency saying that Bayer wanted to thank you and your agency for removing support for California's warning because their case before the Supreme Court right now hinges on you not warning the American people and withdrawing your support on glyphosate. Do you understand the conflict of interest that is before the American people right now, Mr. Secretary?
I
The
understand.
gentlelady's time has
You
expired.
mind if I respond,
Thank you.
Chairman?
The gentleman may respond.
Okay, so right now, EPA is completing an assessment due in 2026. And I understand this is a very important topic for many people in this country. This review that the EPA is being conducted, my guidance to dedicated career staffers, and then we have people who've been there for 20, 30 years, is that I don't want to
It's taking a
just let me
while,
answer.
Secretary Zeldin,
Just-
because
let me answer.
the Supreme Court is going to be making decisions this week, and Congress is voting this week on legal immunity.
Okay, but you made your point. Now, I'm asking, do you mind if I answer? This is an important part of this that I'm sure you also care
And I
about.
think the timing
gentleman's time
is
is
also very
expired.
important, Secretary Zeldin.
The gentlelady's time has expired.
Thank you.
Should I complete my answer or no?
Mr. Administrator, you can respond in writing.
Sure, okay.
3 separate storylines. First, the science fight. IARC, the cancer research arm of the World Health Organization, classified glyphosate as probably carcinogenic to humans in 2015. Second, the regulatory fight. The EPA says glyphosate is not likely to be carcinogenic to humans when used according to its label. And third, the legal fight. Bayer argues that because the EPA approved Roundup labels without a cancer warning, state law failure to warn lawsuits should be blocked. That is the heart of the Supreme Court battle. So when AOC pressed Zeldin, she was not just questioning one meeting, she was questioning whether regulatory power was tilting the courtroom itself. Bayer's argument is straightforward. The company says the EPA repeatedly found glyphosate does not cause cancer and approved Roundup labels without a warning, so state juries should not be allowed to impose a different warning standard after the fact. Plaintiffs say that argument turns federal approval into a shield against accountability, even when evidence of harm remains fiercely contested. Reuters reported that the justices appeared divided, with questions focused on whether federal pesticide law preempts state failure to warn claims. In plain English, this case could decide whether thousands of Americans can keep suing Bayer over Roundup labels, or whether those lawsuits collapse because the EPA never required a cancer warning in the first place. Asked Zeldin whether he had ever participated in a meeting with Bayer where legal or litigation issues were discussed. He said no. Then he acknowledged a brief meeting, but said that topic did not come up. That is when the exchange changed from a policy debate into a credibility test. AOC submitted EPA visitor logs and said she had internal EPA emails obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request. According to her reading of those emails, Bayer planned to raise legal and judicial issues, wanted updates on EPA's regulatory review, and even referred to thanking the agency for updating the glyphosate webpage. At that point, the story was no longer just about herbicide science. It became a story about access, influence, and timing. AOC's sharpest allegation came next. She tied those EPA emails to a policy shift involving California's cancer warning on glyphosate. The EPA's glyphosate page says its prior response to California's Proposition 65 authority was withdrawn, while the agency also says it is still working toward a final registration review decision due in 2026. AOC argued that this shift mattered because Bayer's Supreme Court strategy depends heavily on the EPA's position that glyphosate does not require a cancer warning. That does not prove misconduct, but it does explain why this hearing landed so hard. The Congresswoman was alleging that regulatory posture, legal strategy, and corporate lobbying may have been moving in the same direction at the same time. This is why the exchange exploded. Not because it settled the science, not because it proved a secret deal, but because it exposed the pressure points of the entire Roundup fight in one brutal sequence. A chemical used across American agriculture, a scientific divide that has never gone away, tens of thousands of lawsuits, a Supreme Court showdown over warning labels, and an EPA administrator forced to answer whether Bayer ever pressed its case inside his agency. Bayer says the science is on its side. The EPA says glyphosate is not likely carcinogenic under current labeled use. IARC says it is probably carcinogenic to humans. And AOC is asking whether, in that fog of conflicting claims, the government moved closer to protecting the manufacturer than warning the public. The court will decide the legal question, but politically the damage was done the moment she said, "I have the emails."